The runway boiled with fumes. Ground crews in rubber suits moved like ghosts around the silver shape that looked more like a missile than a plane. The pilot climbed in, sealing himself inside a coffin lined with volatile fuel. One spark, one slip, and he'd vanish in a flash of fire. Then the rocket lit. The ME-163 Comet rushed down the strip and clawed into the sky, 30,000 feet, 4 minutes faster than any other machine. For a few brief moments, it was unstoppable. Then the engine died, and silence took over. Somewhere on the ground, a camera caught the truth. Test flights ending in fire, fuel turning men to vapor. Because this rocket fighter was a decade ahead of its time. But if they could master it, if they could make it fly, they might just turn the impossible war around. By 1944, Nazi Germany was being pounded daily by waves of Allied bombers. City after city burned under clouds of high explosives and incendiaries. The Luftwaffe, once dominant, was struggling to defend its own airspace. In this context of escalating desperation, German engineers were under immense pressure to deliver a technological game-changer. That would be the Messerschmitt Me-163 Comet. Conceived by visionary designer Alexander Lippisch, the Comet was a tailless, rocket-powered interceptor, designed to reach cruise altitude in mere minutes and tear through Allied bomber formations at unmatched speed. It was the first manned aircraft to surpass 1,000 kilometers per hour in level flight, and the only rocket fighter to ever become operational. Its promise was dazzling, intercepting and destroying bombers before they could drop their payloads, then gliding home before Allied escorts could react. The Allies had nothing comparable. In terms of raw climb rate and speed, the Comet was over a decade ahead of its time. Test pilot Heini Dittmar shattered records in 1941 by flying an Me-163A prototype past 1,004 kilometers per hour. For a brief moment, it seemed Germany had cracked the code to future aerial warfare. But the Comet's breathtaking capabilities came at the cost of great danger. Its engine ran on two hypergolic fuels, T-Stoff, a high-test peroxide, and C-Stoff, a volatile hydrazine methanol mix. The two ignited on contact violently. Every flight was a calculated risk, not only against enemy fire, but against the aircraft itself. Still, with the Reich's back against the wall, the Luftwaffe pressed on. Testing moved swiftly from theory to practice, and with it came one of the most dangerous and fascinating test programs in aviation history. The Me-163's test program began in earnest in 1941, initially with unpowered glides, then rocket-assisted flights. The A-series prototypes revealed both immense promise and alarming challenges. The B-series, fitted with the more advanced Walker HWK 109-509 engine, introduced throttle control and new structural designs. But development stalled until 1943 due to persistent fuel system complications and engine reliability issues. From the start, takeoff and landing posed extreme dangers. The Comet had no conventional landing gear. Instead, it used a two-wheel jettisonable dolly for takeoff and a belly skid for landing. A critical early incident caught on surviving wartime footage shows precisely how this could go catastrophically wrong. As the aircraft lifted off, the dolly's suspension recoiled and slammed upward into the airframe. The impact compromised the aircraft's structural integrity, and it crashed shortly after. The haunting black and white footage captures the nose of the plane crumpling mid-climb before the prototype nosedives, leaving a trail of debris. That disaster was a turning point. Engineers replaced the spring-mounted dolly with a rigid crossbeam axle that transferred shock through the skid's oleo strut. Even the improved system still had flaws. If the skid failed to extend properly or absorbed too much impact, pilots suffered shattered vertebrae. Beyond the undercarriage, the biggest threat came from the fuel itself. T-Stoff could dissolve human flesh. C-Stoff was wildly explosive. Ground crews wore acid-proof suits and used separate tankers to load each fuel, flushing systems with water before and after. Even so, accidental mixing took the lives of several technicians. One mechanic perished instantly when he mistakenly poured T-Stoff into a container that held traces of C-Stoff. Equally, pilots had little room for error. Crashing with any fuel left on board usually meant a blinding explosion. Training pilots to fly the Comet was as dangerous as combat. Because the aircraft's performance far exceeded anything else in service, conversion required custom-built gliders with stunted wings to simulate its steep glide path. Some training gliders even had nose-mounted machine pistols to help pilots practice targeting during a brief high-speed pass. One infamous accident during training took the life of Feldwebel Alois Vomdi. On approach, he misjudged his glide, overshot the runway, and touched down in a field. The Comet bounced, struck the ground again, and flipped. A moment later, it exploded. Witnesses described the fireball as instantaneous. There was nothing to recover. Another chilling case involved Oberlieutenant Josef Pose. During a test flight, he released the dolly too early. It struck the underside of the aircraft, rupturing a T-stop line. Pose attempted an emergency landing, but the plane flipped over. When rescue teams found him, the T-stop had dissolved his flight suit. The gruesome nature of these deaths instilled deep fear among pilots, even as the Luftwaffe demanded more flights. The Comet's engine offered only 5 to 7 minutes of powered flight. Once expended, the pilot had to glide back, unpowered, vulnerable, and often short of the runway. JG-400, the unit tasked with operating the Me-163, lost multiple aircraft to forced landings alone. To make matters worse, the Comet's phenomenal speed often made aiming nearly impossible. Pilots had mere seconds to fire. In response, engineers designed the SG-500 Jagdfaust, a vertical firing cannon triggered by photoelectric sensors. It was successfully tested, but arrived too late to affect the war. Despite these lethal challenges, many test pilots praised the Me-163's raw power. Once airborne, it felt like riding a cannon shell, but the feeling of awe was always tempered by dread. Every test took a toll. The aircraft was a technological marvel, but also a death trap. Each improvement came too slowly to offset its inherent flaws. When the Me-163 finally entered operational service in July 1944, it was already too late. Only 279 B-series Comets were delivered. Fuel shortages, engine failures, and a lack of trained pilots grounded many of them. JG-400 was the only unit to fly the Comet in combat, and they scored just 9 confirmed victories at the cost of at least 14 aircraft. Allied pilots quickly learned to attack Comets during landing when they were most vulnerable. Ground crews had to tow the skidded planes back to safety using a tiny tractor called the Schreckschlepper. Enemy fighters often loitered nearby, waiting to pick off returning aircraft. Even without enemy action, explosions on the tarmac claimed several lives. After the war, the Allies scrambled to capture as many Me-163s as possible. Over 30 Comets were sent to the US, UK, and USSR for evaluation. One of the surviving planes is on display today at the National Museum of the US Air Force. Inside its unfinished fuselage, restorers found a stone jammed against the fuel tank, a sabotage attempt, perhaps by a forced laborer. Etched into its metal is a simple message in French, quote, "Mon cœur est en chômage." My heart is not occupied. The Comet's influence stretched into the Cold War. British and Soviet engineers studied its delta-wing design and rocket propulsion. The Bell X-1, which broke the sound barrier in 1947, inherited many of the Me-163's design lessons. Yet no nation ever built another operational rocket fighter. In the end, the Me-163 Comet was not just ahead of its time. It was beyond what its time could safely handle.